Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the In Confidence podcast. We've both returned. We've had a little bit of time out. We're going to be speaking about that today because the topic is self-care, and ultimately that's what we've been doing over the last few weeks and will be for the next few weeks coming as well. Firstly, Tom, before we jump in, how's your week been?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. It's good to be back recording and getting some episodes out after we haven't in a couple of weeks. Yeah, looking forward to it. I've actually got a holiday booked that I'm going on in the next couple of days. So, yeah, just making sure all work bits are sorted before I inevitably take that break. As you said, timed it pretty well with the topic of self-care that we're going to go through today. So, yeah, how are you, mate?
Yeah, I know we were messaging just before. We got back from kind of North Wales last week, so we had a week there, which was absolutely lovely, some family time. Got back into running as well, which I know we'll come on to in some of the self-care bits. But yeah, it was just nice to take a bit of a break away from sport and not really think about any of this. Although I was excited for this conversation, I can't lie, I was looking forward to this one. So kind of without us pausing anymore then, because we've already alluded to it, self-care, what's that mean to you straight off, Sam?
I think it's such a like a wide scoping topic with like a variety of different things that can be individualized to each person and how they view it, dependent on the role or discipline or way of life that they like to carry out, to be honest with you, to put it that simply. But I think for me, it's from a professional standpoint, it's ensuring that I look after things that are under my control to allow me to operate efficiently and effectively whilst I'm in my role as a practitioner. Now that might mean making sure that lots of my personal goings on or personal stresses of everyday life, depending on how you look at it. It's quite dramatic to say stresses, just the different things that go on in day-to-day life are as under control and as well structured as I'd like them to be through my personal experience, to ensure that I'm able to concentrate fully and make sure that I'm operating effectively within my role. I think that's quite a formal way of describing it, but that's how I look at it personally. I don't know if you've got a slightly different standpoint on it.
Yeah, if you've taken formal, then I'll go a bit more informal.
Yeah,
I always use the analogy because I don't know where I picked it up from, so apologies if someone's listening. They go, "I was definitely the one that's all right in this," um, but it was one that always stuck with me. Is I'll always go back to that oxygen mask on an aeroplane. Again, they get into trouble. Oxygen masks drop down, and you're always told to put your own on before helping someone else. And that's the analogy I always come back to in regards to self care. And you've alluded to it there, Tom. Of I know I can't do my best work unless I'm actually looking after myself. And if I give too much for too long without considering myself at all, I know I'm going to burn out. And I
yeah,
always come back to that of going, it's probably time to look after yourself, to put that oxygen mask on now, just to refresh, as we have done over kind of the week away and things like that, to go, now is a little bit of time for you, because we spend so much of our time trying to help everyone else that I think it's really easy for us to get too caught up in it and to forget, oh wait, actually I've not done anything for myself for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That explains why maybe I'm dropping a little bit of motivation. I'm a kind of, you mentioned about getting other things in order. It's probably why they're not. It's because I've not given any attention to those elements.
yeah. No, definitely. And I think an important part to mention is that the role that we sit in, we often find ourselves taking in quite a significant amount of information week on week. And it's exactly as you just alluded to, it's really important that you are able to take in that information week on week so you're able to do your role effectively. But then who's taking on your information that you might need to share with someone at that point? And that doesn't have to be dramatic. That could literally just be telling someone that you feel really tired on this particular week, or you feel like you're really looking forward to the day off that's coming, or the few scheduled days off that you've got coming up. And that's not a problem at all, but it's really important, in my opinion, that you have those mechanisms in place, or switch off from certain things and be comfortable switching off from certain things as well, so that when you then do arrive to complete your day-to-day role, you're really able and sort of willing and looking forward to almost like tackling the day ahead and the task you've got to complete. I think that's an important point.
Yeah. I remember, as a little bit of insight, I remember during my training having conversations with partner and family just about life in general and hearing what they're up to. And some of the comments being, you're not very good at listening, Ryan, considering that that's part of your job.
Yeah.
And just switching off on like an evening and things like that, just where you really, really want to listen and you're just not. And I remember reflecting on that, going, so why is that happening? If I can do it in my job, why is it not transferring into kind of personal life? And what I realized was I was spending all day listening to people, which is tiring. That when I got home, that was the last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
In the nicest way possible. I was like, I've listened to everyone's kind of stresses and strains and everything that goes with performing in sport all day. The last thing I actually want to do is listen to other people complaining or how they're managing stress, because then it feels like I'm never taking that hat off. And that was a big realization for me, going, there is a murky line between the two, in that you can't spend all day doing it and then switch off on an evening, because actually that's exactly what family and partners want. They want to be able to have you to vent to and speak to. And that was a big realization of going, right, so how do I manage that as well if I can't switch off how I thought I could, maybe? I don't know if that's something similar that you've been through there, Tom.
Yeah, 100%. Mine's like, I think one of the key things I started in the past couple of years, probably since like COVID and the lockdowns, was everyone got into, as soon as it got taken, I was never a gym goer, but once it got taken away, it was something that I wanted to do, and made a big effort to make sure that I do that most days before work. And it's something that I've really got into, take it really seriously. From an enjoyment point of view, like I really enjoy the fact that I'm able to take it seriously. But one thing that I was doing for a while, and I started to realize how that it just really wasn't beneficial, was that whilst in the gym, I was putting on like sports psych podcasts and different things to listen to. So that I always thought, I'm not missing out on this information. Like, I'm having these 2 hours to myself, but I can fuel myself with extra information whilst I'm here. And after 2 to 3 weeks of doing that, I just really found out how unpractical and unbeneficial that was. The whole point of the reason why I was going to the gym was to make sure my physical health was in order, which I take really seriously. I take pride in the fact that I like to be really physically active and fit. So that was one of the reasons. But secondly, I found it really good mentally that it allowed me to set up for the day. But actually trying to take on those sports psych podcasts whilst I was training was just so unproductive for me, because I ended up firstly not taking the information, it just become white noise. So I'd have to listen to it again if I really wanted it. And secondly, I didn't feel like I was switching off from the role. It felt like I wasn't able to get away from it. And actually, I didn't necessarily need to get away from it either. But the whole point of going to the gym was to ensure that I was having a break or setting myself up for the day that I'm about to have, which is quite often a really enjoyable one. So I actually took that time, and the gym and work are two separate entities where I listen to my music and just do what I want to do in the gym. And then I'm ready to attend work, rather than using the gym to gain some extra knowledge so that I can utilize that within work. Those two things just weren't beneficial and didn't really match in my opinion. But it did take me a couple of weeks to work that out, that I wasn't missing out on information. I just had to gain it at a different point if I really wanted it.
Yeah, I've gone through something really similar, which I think is good because it obviously relates between us two. So I imagine other people will resonate with this as well. That I used to use like the commute to work. At times it's been like an hour and a half. So I always went, right, let's use the time. Let's put on some psych podcasts and things to listen to that I know is going to be valuable. That's going to help me feel like I'm not just wasting time behind the wheel. And found that on a morning when I'm traveling there, it's a really good way for me to get into the mindset and get into that role and separate it from home. I've gone, right, this is me getting ready to go to work. But I was also doing it at the end of the day. And what I found was that I was almost extending my working day of wearing that psych hat by like 2-3 hours every single day.
Yeah.
And like you've mentioned there, it just got on top of me so much, because it almost became, oh, well, I'm driving, so therefore, not that I have to, but it's something that I do. And actually breaking out of that, going, well, no, let's listen to podcasts on the way And then as soon as you step out of work, the journey home could be music or just chill time or making a few calls to mates and things like that, using that time more productively than thinking, here's another opportunity to learn more about sports. But as you've said, we just overload ourselves. And I think I was writing down some bits ahead of this one. And the bit that I came back to, would be interesting your take on this as well, was that I think a huge challenge that we have as practitioners within this space, and everyone really doing something that they enjoy, is that we're passionate about what we do. And therefore that blurs, I think, the line of the work bit. Actually we do work and then we come home in an evening and we do more of it because we enjoy it, and it is motivating and it does recharge our battery to some extent. But actually it's really important for us to think, let's do something non-sports psych related intentionally, so that we don't spend all day doing it. We get home and then we do podcasts and we listen to different documentaries about sports psychology. We're reading articles and things. You're like, I've actually switched off, but I haven't, because what I'm using to switch off is exactly the same stuff I'm doing for work.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, is that because I know I can speak for both me and you when we say we both enjoy it so much. Well, actually, one of the reasons why I've learned now to switch off is so that I remain enjoying it so much. If I'm being really honest, because as you said, I'm really fortunate this hasn't happened to me. It hasn't become like all encompassing where you start to not enjoy it as much. Like I'm really fortunate that has not really ever shown signs of happening for me. But I think that's because quite early on, I was able to sort of unblur those potential blurred lines where it can become you're doing it constantly and all the time. Whereas there's now like not time constraints, but I have a better appreciation of what needs to be done when, to allow me to keep enjoying it as much as I do. And I think that was a really important point for me.
Yeah, and I know we've had conversations before. It's something that I've said to students as well when they've asked what's applied practice like and what tips there are. I'll always come back to the have two phones one. That was a huge one for me. By having two phones, I can have a work one and then I have just a personal one. And what it means is that if I'm outside of work, I can just leave that work phone at home and go off and do whatever I want to do with family and friends. And I'm not tempted to look at it because I actually can't. There's nothing on my personal one that alludes to kind of to work. And I found that hugely freeing to switch off because, as you know, all you end up doing is just looking at the WhatsApp messages that come on, even if it's in your own personal time, out of interest, out of care, out of passion. But it's constantly on the go as well. And you're just seeing it racking up and you're feeling like, oh, if I don't look at it, there'll just be more to catch up on. So I'll just keep reading even if I'm not replying, and it just doesn't give you that chance to switch off at all.
Yeah. And I think that sport especially doesn't necessarily have an end time in terms of there isn't clock in and clock out hours. So sometimes them group chats can be going at all hours of the morning and into the evening, because you could be training with a range of different athletes who have a range of different time constraints. Some might train in the morning, some in the day, some really late on into the evening, all depending on their age and level and all that sort of thing. But that can, exactly as you just said, blur the lines because there isn't an end time. And there's also not a start time in terms of when you must have to clock in and start with these messages and that sort of stuff. So I think if you're able to set that yourself and be really fortunate to have a good employer that allows you to do that also, which I think is really important, then that's a real big benefit in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's key. We've mentioned obviously about you kind of being physically active, going to the gym for the mental and the physical kind of well-being elements. Anything else you do in regards to self-care that you found beneficial that you'd like to share?
I think the gym is the main one, and actually just making sure that exactly how I have with my work, ensuring that I enjoy that too, and that's where it comes of going into the mode I'm about to work really hard physically to allow me to go and work hard mentally after it. And I think I'm very fortunate to spend a lot of time outdoors with my role, which can be an absolute nightmare in the winter because you get freezing and you're soaked the majority of the time, especially in England. The weather's so poor. that you spend a lot of the time doing that. But I just personally feel massive benefits from being outside. Like I can't sit behind a laptop for very long. There's essential planning that needs to be done where you must have time to go and sit behind your laptop and get these work points done that are really relevant for the rest of your week or day or even year or season, depending on what sport you might be in. But for me, then I have to go and give myself some few minutes outside, and that can be a couple 10-minute points throughout the day, just so that I've got that little bit of fresh air, which has allowed me to go, okay, I've not been sat behind a laptop screen for 7 hours or 8 hours. I've done a couple of hours in the morning. That's sound. I've got all the bits that I desperately need to do then. I'll give myself 10, 15 minutes to go and have a walk outside, and then I'll come back in and I'll crack on again. I kind of treat it like I'm a 5, 6-year-old where you have playtimes at school, where you would do a couple lessons, you go outside, you come back and you do it again. Like I still really like that structure, and that's how for me, that's how I'd like to keep it, and something that I've been able to balance well to allow me to do that currently, really. What about you?
Yeah, I was just thinking, obviously, with you mentioning about exercising in the morning and me getting back into my running, I alluded to it in the intro, and how beneficial I found that, just getting out and being physically active. It has numerous benefits for me that I love, kind of just the freedom of doing that. You just put your running trainers on, you head out the door. There's no requirement of planning or anything. That it gives me the opportunity to get up and out on the morning. I've always found, and again, it's personal to everyone, but I've always found being physically active on a morning much more beneficial for me to set me up for the day than trying to get it in at the end of the day when I'm maybe not feeling it. It's easier to talk myself out of it, even as a psychologist, easier to talk myself out of it on an evening or on night time than it is just to get up and just go. And before you've fully woken up, you already find that you're running down the road, so you can't back out now. That was hugely beneficial for me. And you mentioned about listening to music while exercising as well. For me, I tried it with running. Yeah, it was beneficial to some point. But then I got to a point where I was like, no, let's do no headphones. Because I knew that if I'm listening to music, it's going to distract from that, just getting away from everything. And as I mentioned, in regards to like that commute, there's always the temptation to go, well, I'm out running. I've got half an hour or an hour or however long. I'll just put that podcast on. And that blurred that lines, as we were saying, of kind of trying to be really hard line on the white and black between work and play, if we call it that.
Yeah.
That if I'm not listening to anything, then I can't be tempted to let sports like creep in here, because I know I would, and I know I would love it, and I'd really enjoy it. But actually, it's to remember what's this playtime for, and it's to give myself a break from it. Kind of just forget about everything and get out. So yeah, so it's interesting. How have you? I guess you mentioned kind of how you avoided listening to podcasts, but have you ever found that you're tempted to listen to podcasts again in the gym, or
Not now, because at the start I was almost like enforced it upon myself that that's what I was meant to do, and then once I found out that really wasn't beneficial, I just know it doesn't work for me. So I haven't got, not that I've got no interest in doing it, I just haven't got any interest at that point doing it. I think that's the key. That's the key takeaway for me, really. I think it's really important as well that we've mentioned like real physical things that you can do to switch off. And that works for us. But I think anybody listening, there's a range of different things you can do which take no physical output if that's not something that you're interested in, that actually you can go and do. Like we've mentioned about listening to podcasts and that sort of stuff. Well, actually, who's to say that you don't go listen to a podcast that's completely outside of sports cycle, completely different, to switch off? I think that's an important point to make. It doesn't have to be potentially the physical things that we've alluded to.
Yeah, and I can mention one that isn't physical, but I think there's, for myself personally, there's a physical element to some of my self-care bits. And I've said this to athletes in the past, that because we spend so much time watching them be physically active, and a lot of the time we are just stood there or chatting and things, but we're watching them being physically active, that you feel like you come out of that going, feel like I need to be physically active, or I want to be, because I've been around it so much and I haven't been, that it feels weird. So you're like, I'll go out and do something because we feel that want and need to, but a nice need, not like we have to do it, or
it's almost like
it's just a motivation.
That I was just about to say, it's like an inspirational need of people work so hard physically throughout the day, it does. Very fortunate to be in a position where it's quite inspiring. It genuinely makes you want to go and do it,
Yeah,
to be honest. Yeah.
yeah. But yes, spinning off from physical elements, obviously we know each other quite well. I'm quite creative with different elements, so I've got back into kind of drawing and painting and things like that. So again, saying it doesn't always have to be something physical or mentally taxing. I know one of my values is being creative. So again, it's finding out, right, how do we embody those within kind of elements of self care, knowing that, well, if we value them and the things we hold dear, then if we can do more of them, then there's a recharging element, there's a motivational element coming through that. I feel like we're starting to turn into a site consultancy, but ultimately it's because a lot of the elements that we do supporting athletes, we're looking at them as people, we're helping them out as people, and we can turn a lot of it back against ourselves, especially from a self-care perspective. If we feel like we're losing track of some of these bits, going, right, if an athlete was in my position, what advice would I give them? Because I don't think it's a position we often put ourselves in, definitely not through training.
Yeah.
And being a student going, how would I help someone if they came with what I'm experiencing? Right, brilliant, let's do that.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think one thing that I didn't mention that I definitely should have is pub with friends.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, like that's something that I thoroughly enjoy. Often it's to watch football and those sort of things, and discuss football and go through all the different sports that we may be watching at the time, whether it's the Ashes or whether it's Wimbledon that's just been on, or the football season approaching. But that's the type of things that I didn't mention earlier, because I was talking about the physical things, for example, which I feel like really benefit in that sense. Well, actually, going to the pub with my friends is a real big benefit as well.
Yeah, and I think that's where, and you can agree or disagree, but me agreeing with kind of what you said about, even though we've worked in some of these sports, going out and watching them, well, how can that be self-care and getting a break from it? But for me, it's because we're approaching it with a different hat on, that we're no longer a sports psych, we're actually just a fan or a supporter of people performing in that sport. And therefore it's nothing like our day job, even though it's maybe on the same pitch, court, pool, that it is completely removed from it. Yeah. You're nodding, so I'm thinking that I'm striking the same kind of chords with it.
100%, yeah. Like, just because we might work in sport doesn't mean we aren't able to be a fan of various different sports, athletes within sports, and pass an opinion with our friends on these particular sports as well. Like, that is, and always has been, one of my main things that I've loved to do, and that won't change really in that aspect. I think from sitting in this role, it's given me a better appreciation of what some of the people might be going through to compete at the highest level of their sports, which I think has been good, like for myself personally. But that doesn't impact on when you're having basically a bit of a natter with your friends about the sports that you've been watching. So
yeah, and I think that brings it back to that kind of statement of, although we're passionate about what we do as sports psychologists, that actually we had a core passion just for sports that predated all of this, because we've obviously enjoyed sports much longer than we've enjoyed psychology. Yeah. So it's nice to just tap into that at times when we have the opportunity to as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add at the end of this conversation, Tom?
I think, like, as an overarching point, and I feel like we almost say this at the end of every podcast, but it is individualized. Like, if you're listening to this and think, actually, I don't do any of those things to switch off or make sure that I'm looking after myself, that's fine. That's genuinely not a problem at all. I would just suggest, as long as that you have something that you think really allows you to switch off, that's the most important takeaway from this conversation. It's not what you do, it's the fact that you are doing it, which I think is probably my most important takeaway point from this particular conversation, I would say.
Yeah, I'd definitely second that. And there's nothing more that I can add to that as a summary there, Tom. So I think we're in a good position to kind of bring it to a close and thank people for listening again. Obviously, we started saying it was episode 6. We're kind of deep into it now and we're enjoying how it's going, and we're seeing plays and follows and things like that cracking up. So yeah, if you like it, obviously share it, comment, give us feedback. We really appreciate any interaction we get, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Definitely. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.